And with that, I'd like to introduce our next guest. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, other than they both come from the marvelous state of Louisiana. Start with you, Johanna.
My name is Johanna Braud. I am the statewide coordinator for Louisiana Drug and Specialty Courts Office. Our office is housed within the Supreme Court of Louisiana in the Judicial Administrator's Office.
And then let's turn to you, Fletcher.
I'm Fletcher Hyacinth. I am the program attorney / manager, also at the Specialty Court Office at the Louisiana Supreme Court. And I have not been there for as long as Johanna has, but I've been there for about 18 months now.
Johanna, please tell us about yourself.
My background is in accounting, and so I came to the Specialty Court Office from corporate accounting. I started working, I left corporate accounting because it was 60, 70-hour weeks, and I had a small child, and that was too much. And then I got a job with Jefferson Parish Human Services Authority right outside of New Orleans, and that was back in the late 90s when they were just starting their adult and juvenile drug court programs. So helped them secure the funding for that, and then a few years later, ended up working for the Supreme Court Drug and Specialty Court Office. And I've been with them 21 years now.
Okay, and Fletch, what about you?
Well, I hail originally from the Caribbean, hence the accent, and came to America back in 1994. Did my undergrad in psychology. Did law school at Loyola in New Orleans, and after that I started working at the 3rd District up in North Louisiana. Approximately 2005, we had the grand idea of starting a drug court program, and the judges wanted me to look into that. And at the time I felt like a lost ball in tall grass, trying to figure out what was going on, and we were able to get some assistance from the folks at LADSC. And they provided some excellent training to help us get us started and so on. I worked there with them and wore many hats, from chief cook to dishwasher. And
no, you got to tell us what it was. We don't do chief cook and dishwasher.
Let's see. I was a drug court coordinator, assisted as well as case management. At certain times, I even assisted doing drug testing. I also was one of the hearing officers.
Wait a minute, I got to pause on that one. You actually were holding the urine cups.
That is correct. I did the whole thing. I did the observation. Saw it going from point A to point B on numerous occasions. Even saw it when I came from something other than point A.
So you've dealt with it from the ground up.
I have, definitely have.
All right.
And I've got to see very many facets of it.
All right.
And during that process, I got to be, of course, very, very involved with the participants, and got to know them very well, got to know family members, children, parents. Sometimes got to places where I would be crying with them as well during certain times when things were tough during that experience. All in all, I have to say a wonderful experience to have had there.
How did you get involved then with the Supreme Court?
About 18 months ago, Johanna and the folks there at the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice and a number of others, they had posted that there was a position opening up. And this position involved a program attorney position. And I felt like my schedule was flexible enough, and it was something I always dreamed of, working for the Supreme Court. And so I interviewed, had the wonderful fortune of getting offered the job, which I readily accepted. And I have been working with them ever since. It's been a wonderful experience. Johanna is great to work for. It's been a learning experience, because at that level, you see things that are on a macro scale that you don't see in the district court level. When you're dealing with the micro. Yes. That's correct.
But let me go back to you, Johanna. How did you get into this position? Let's do it in more detail.
Sure. So I started with, about 21 years ago, doing the fiscal monitoring. So that meant going out to all of the programs to make sure that they were spending the funding that they were allotted in the right ways. We had just gotten, maybe a year before, an appropriation from the legislature to bring all drug courts under the Supreme Court. So they needed to pull somebody in who was able to organize that funding, make sure that everyone was held accountable. So I did that, restructured some things, helped write the policy and procedures manual, and then went out to each program to make sure they were spending their money in the right way. You can't do that until you know what they do. So it took a lot of education. on what each program, what their local resources are, because they all work differently. And so to make sure that they're spending the funds appropriately, and then a little bit of pushback from our end to the state because they needed funding for other things that the state didn't want to give us funding for. So helped get the programs what they needed from a state level, from a funding level, then moved up to the business services manager, which was really sort of running the business of the statewide Office of Drug Court. I had a number of directors while I was in that position. So what I love the most about that is the job changed depending on the personality, the interest level of the director. So I sort of did everything throughout.
All right, and then ultimately you became the director.
I did. So Carrie Lentini was the prior director. She retired about 1.5 years ago, and it was while she has big shoes to fill, it was an easy to step into that job because Carrie and I worked really well together and basically did everything together.
So you've been a director for about 1.5 years,
yes.
About the same length of time that you had Fletcher on board with
yes.
you. Is that correct?
And I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't know that I could do it without him.
All right.
He's pretty
and
fantastic.
You bring a unique mixture here because many of the people that we've been talking to come up through social work or counseling, and we have an accountant and a lawyer, which would suggest that there is a difference in how your office operates that I'm going to come back to. Do you have a state association?
We do.
How do you work with them?
Very closely. We're both ex officio on the board of directors for the state association. Post-COVID, the association's going through a little bit of a reorganization because we didn't do conferences for the COVID years. So we're working with the president of the association to sort of rebuild it and reshape it into a way that's going to be best for the state.
Okay.
Correct. And I was the prior president of the association. And during that term, we also saw a number of changes. The association is a fledgling state, I guess, was such that you had a number of folks that had been on there for a while that saw drug courts come into existence in the state of Louisiana. And since then, there have been a significant number of programs that have come on board, and we have a lot of people that are new on the board. So we're excited to see that as well.
Okay. And is there an annual training in Louisiana for, what do they call them? Treatment courts, recovery courts, specialty courts?
Specialty courts. We call them specialty courts, although I realize that language is a little bit frowned upon now. I learned that the other day. So we do an annual training. The last one was in October of 2022. This year we did things a little bit differently. With the conference being in Houston, it's really easy for everybody to travel to. So instead of doing an annual training for 2023, we did 3 regional trainings and brought the training to different parts of the state. Fletcher's from the northern part of the state, 6 hours away. So it was nice for them not to have to travel to New Orleans, which is where the conference typically is. So we brought the training to them, and we're able to have trainers come to the 3 different locations to do the conference, and made it easier on the professionals that came.
So are you guys planning a conference for 2024?
We are.
That's correct.
All right, Fletcher, what do you know about it?
Well, right now we are hoping to have it in the Lake Charles area, and we're hoping to actually have some speakers that have been identified from different parts of the United States, and some of them have been identified as well. Hopefully will be coming from this conference as well. I will say that one of the things that we have done over the years, and probably will continue to do, is that oftentimes in our partnership with the State Association, we will provide other trainings as well throughout the year, as is needed for the different disciplines. So for example, this year, working in conjunction with the CDC, we have a grant that we utilize, and with that grant, we also are able to provide some additional trainings. We have done trainings for folks with MRT, with change companies, with WellScreen. We're also hoping to have the matrix model as well later on next month. So we've got a number of different trainings that we also utilize throughout the year to provide some assistance to folks in the field.
So how can people find out about the annual training and these other trainings? Do they go to your website?
So the association has its own website, LADSC.org, and that stands for Louisiana Association of Drug and Specialty Courts, and everything's posted there. We also have a Facebook page that the president has been very involved in making sure it's updated and all the latest information is on there. I was just looking for the date of the next conference. I think it's in March of next year.
Okay.
And one of the things that we do as well is part of our information gathering also, of course, involves getting all the listing of the courts currently, the coordinators' information. So we will regularly send out emails to everyone to notify them about upcoming trainings and things that may be of an interest to them.
Another thing, one more thing that the association helps us a lot with is, so we do a DWI court-specific training, and this year in January we did a family preservation court-specific training. So the association helped us to facilitate those trainings, find speakers, and sort of do the grunt work with that.
In Michigan, so the listeners to this podcast may not know what a DWI drug court is, because in Michigan it's not DWI, it's OWI, and in other states it's DUI. We call them sobriety courts, and that makes it a much easier explanation for people. But essentially what you're referring to there, I believe, would be a drunk driving court.
Correct.
So how are problem-solving courts in your state funded?
So we get an appropriation through our legislature each year. It's part of the overall judicial branch budget. And that is made up of about 60% state general funds and 40% federal TANF funds.
Okay. In some of the other states, particularly in Texas and New Mexico, they've managed to convince the legislature to give them a piece of the liquor tax, a small piece, between 1% and 5%, which has done amazing in terms of funding specialty courts. I mention that because as part of this podcast, we're trying to share information, and we're looking for creative ways of doing things. So I mentioned that to you guys to put it in your...
That's amazing. I'd love to see about how we can do that.
It's always good to get additional information that could help out.
Yes.
We'll talk. How do you think specialty courts can be improved in the state of Louisiana?
A couple of ways, and feel free to chime in, Fletch, anytime you want. I think we could use additional funding. I think we could... there are a few parishes or judicial districts in the state that don't have a specialty court or a drug court. We could get into those parishes. We could also, I think drug and specialty courts could, or drug and treatment courts could be a one-stop shop and make it more of a treatment court for whether the person that comes before them has a mental health issue or a substance use disorder issue or both, and sort of triage them and be a single point of contact and then branch out. That's something that we haven't really done in our state overall, and I think it would be really beneficial.
And Fletcher, what do you think the great challenges for your office are?
I think one of the challenges that we have is probably just maybe having more communication with various agencies and departments. That's something that I think we're currently working on, and it's been a great opportunity for us to have the partnerships that we have had. As a matter of fact, with the recent partnership we've had with the CDC, with the OD2A grant, we were able to find out about a number of other agencies that do a number of operations within our state that have worked hand in hand with us, and that's allowed us to get more involved with other departments, including the Department of Corrections, Probation and Parole, a variety of other human resource departments as well that we didn't at the time think we needed to necessarily have a partnership with, but it's been an eye-opening experience, and it's been very, very good for our office.
So you've found a challenge in improving state communications, intrastate, if you will,
yes,
with state departments, because your communications with the association and the drug courts in the state are good.
Yes.
That's good. What do you think your greatest accomplishments have been, Johanna?
One of the things that I'm proud of that we did this year is I was able to, through all the hard work that's been done over the years, we had a judges training in April, and they invited us to bring in whoever we wanted to bring in for a speaker. So we brought in a national expert on the neuroscience of addiction, and we tend to only provide training to the judges that are involved in specialty courts. This was all general jurisdiction judges across the state. They're finding the same problems. The same people are coming before them. So for them to understand a little bit more about addiction, it opens their eyes to how they can refer these people to better services. I'm also proud, Fletch has done so much hard work on this training for the Overdose to Action grant that we get through the CDC, just to get better training for our treatment providers. As y'all know, there's been a lot of turnover nationwide.
Yes.
We're dealing with a lot of new people in every position. And so some of them don't have the expertise, the experience to know how to best deal with this population. So Fletch has worked his fingers to the bone to make sure that they get all of the training that they need.
I have to say, though, even though she's putting a lot of the kudos on me, there's a lot that goes to Johanna. The office has, over the years, developed a very nice, streamlined product. In other words, the Louisiana Supreme Court, with the Drug and Specialty Court Office, they've got a process wherein they do systematic, programmatic, and financial reports that they compile every year, that they compile based on the information they gather from the different courts throughout the state. In doing that, they have their finger or their thumb, so to speak, on the pulse of what's going on throughout the state. At any given time, they have an idea of how many clients are actively being served. Because of the development of a case management system that is basically, it allows for all of the programs to input data into this on a regular basis. It allows for the Supreme Court to also have a very good idea of what courts are active, what courts are having a certain rate of growth at a certain period of time. And I think all of those things allow for us to get a better picture of what's actually happening within the state.
Had an interesting discussion with the Maryland state coordinator who has his staff go out and attend the staffing and review sessions, and to come back and make suggestions later informally. And they've come up with a dashboard that is turned competitive for the local court coordinators. Those who are in compliance get the higher scores, and it's turned into a bit of a competition that's working really well to get them to apply best standards.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a
it's
great
really
idea.
worked out well. So where do you see problem-solving courts in your state in 10 years?
I think in the next 10 years we'll have substantial growth. We are so lucky to have so much support from our bench at the Supreme Court. Of the 7 justices, I want to say at least 4 have been a drug court judge at some point. So they know about the program. They're incredibly supported. Those who didn't oversee a drug court program are still very supportive. So we're lucky in that sense. They talk to their legislators and get the word out about what the good work that our programs are doing. So we do enjoy a lot of support from our legislature, and that comes in financial support.
Correct. I think that that's one of the biggest things that we see in our state, where we have across the board support from the judiciary to the legislators. Of course, a number of representatives have come to different graduations, in part because of the great work that's done by the folks in the field. And frankly, you see the results. We've had people who have reported during campaigns coming upon a drug court client and realizing that that person has turned their life around, they are doing great, and they tell that person some of the best testimonies regarding how well our programs have done. And that's, I think, something that's a testimony to the actual work that's being done in the field, but also to the work that's being done at a different level. One of the things that I've seen coming from the fields and being in the Supreme Court now is seeing how much we try to make that information available to the various parts of the public. Because you don't see things. And when you're in drug court and you see a graduate, we are aware of it. We're acutely aware of this person's life being changed and very different. But that person who has no longer got that felony conviction or no longer has that particular issue that is so significant over their life, one of the things they tend to do is they want to distance themselves from it. And so in doing so, the people they run into won't know necessarily what's happened. We have found an interesting situation wherein most times people that hear about drug court through the jail system. And that's very, very different. And so one of the things that we're seeing, and one of the things that I've seen coming to the Supreme Court, is seeing how much it is that's involved in pushing that information to others who would otherwise not be aware of what actually happens within a drug or specialty court setting.
So when you talk about people hearing about it in the jail system, are you saying they're hearing about it from the sheriffs or the Department of Corrections or that they're hearing about it from other people who are in the system and saying, this is a way you can get out, who are also inmates, or is it a combination of the both?
I would say it's definitely a combination of the both. And it's interesting to hear because you'll hear from both sides different, very, very different stories. You'll hear, oh, this thing is way too easy. And then you'll hear, this thing is way too hard. And it's funny because it depends on who you talk to. Sometimes you'll have someone in law enforcement that may have a perspective that, oh, this is way too easy of a program. But that notion can shift as well the more they get aware about how the program works. And so it's nice to see that. It's been amazing to see how different departments have come together to realize that this presents and provides for their communities an opportunity for significant growth and changing something that's been a plague for a long time.
I want to thank you both for taking the time to have this conversation. And I want to have one final question for each of you. I'm going to start with you, Fletch. Is there anything you'd like to share about treatment courts or specialty courts in your state that I haven't asked you about?
Well, that's a good question. In Louisiana, as I guess with a number of folks that border the Gulf, we have to deal with storms that come through, and those storms can be significant. They can disrupt lives, they can turn things over, they can make it so that you don't know whether you're going or you're coming, and it can make for a very traumatic experience. In our state, our people are resilient. They have seen storms come, they've seen storms go. Sometimes those storms have battered us so much that it feels like it will be hard to rebuild. But I think the fact that we have gotten to a place where we do rebuild, we do get stronger, we've seen that growth, we've seen that, and we've gotten stronger each time. It's a message that we can also utilize, and in fact do utilize with our specialty courts. Because we see so many lives that have experienced those storms too. And I think that is one of those things that Louisianans have a lot to be proud of. And I think in our state, with our specialty courts, we get to witness that on a regular basis.
Okay. Johanna, I'd like to ask you the same question. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to convey to our listeners?
Just how much I appreciate sort of the nationwide work that's happening to identify trends, because, as you know, the drugs of choice are constantly changing. Mm-hmm. It's hard to keep up, and it's so important for us and those practitioners in our state to be up on the latest information to best serve the people that are struggling with those with substance use disorder with these new and emerging drugs. I wish that we didn't have a job. I wish that I didn't have a job because I wouldn't.
No, I disagree with you. You guys are good to work with, I know.
Well, you're wonderful to work with. But I wish we didn't have to do this work because I wish it wasn't such.
We wish humanity didn't have the flaws that it does. That's
Agreed.
True. But given it does, I think it's good to know that there are people like both of you working hard to assist people who have substance abuse issues and to help make people in the state of Louisiana safe. So with that, I'd like to thank you for being on Justice Speaks.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.